Hey guys, Chase with Sherpa Equipment Company. Today we're going to be installing our Stratus rack on this 4th gen Ford Ranger. This rack is designed to work with a Super Crew Ranger with a short bed and a Go Fast camper. This is a drill rack, which meaning it is an invasive install. You will be dropping your headliner. We're not going to explain how to do that in this video, but we will have a link in the description for a previous install that we did, which will show you how to do that. But if you don't feel comfortable doing this by yourself, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll help you find a installer that can help you do the install. We highly recommend doing that if it's your first drill rack. There's going to be 8 holes in your roof, and you're going to be dropping headliners, so it's pretty in depth. If you do feel comfortable, we'll help you through it, and this video should help a lot. We're going to go right into what you're going to receive in a package from us. You're going to have your 2 side plates, you're going to have your rivet mounts, your mounting feet, wind fairing, crossbars, a bundle of hardware that will include your rivets. You're going to also have a small tube of blue Loctite, a little tube of silicone, and then your 4 plugs that are going to be plugging up the factory holes in the roof. Before we do anything with the rack itself, most important thing is we're going to want to disconnect our battery. Since we're getting in and around the airbags, we don't want to accidentally set something off by, pushing on a wiring harness too hard or drilling into something. And so we're going to disconnect battery right off the bat, and we're going to head on inside to show you what we're doing inside the truck. Now that we're inside the truck, I'm going to show you where the bolts are to remove the factory weather stripping on the roof. You're going to have one up here kind of behind your A-pillar, and then there's going to be one behind your C-pillar. The headliner in this video is not going to be fully removed. You can take this approach if you feel comfortable enough, but again, if it's your first time, we really recommend dropping the whole headliner. But we just have the A, B, and C pillar kind of pulled away. We have enough room to get up under there, find the bolts, and get a wrench in. So what you're going to need is, for the front, I like to use a 10 millimeter socket. And then on the one on the C pillar, I like to use a 10 millimeter ratcheting wrench. If you have other tools that work better for you, that works too. But what we're going to do is find our bolts. They're going to be kind of tucked up in a hole up behind the airbag. So you're going to want to just slightly push that out of the way. And then you should be able to start taking that bolt off. And you're just going to want to take the nut off, making sure not to drop it, and pull them out, and then we'll pull the weather stripping out. So now we've got our front bolt out, we're going to move to the back. I didn't mention it before, but you're going to want to be very careful when doing this. If you crease this headliner at all, it's really hard to get the creases out. So you want to be very gentle when you're pulling down on it. Now that we're at the back, we're going to take our 10 mil ratcheting wrench. This one's a little bit easier to get to, but still pretty awkward. Kind of just have to fumble around up in there. Once you get it on, just remove that. Again, be very careful not to also drop the nut into the roof. It's pretty easy to do, and it's very hard to get them out, so just be careful. So now we got the bolt, or the nut, so it's just finger tight, and we can work the rest of it off with our fingertips. And you're just going to want to be careful to not drop it like I just did there. So now that both of the nuts are removed, and you hopefully have both after you fish them out of your B or C pillar, you can go ahead and pop your weather stripping off the top. It should come right out, and that'll leave your the channel exposed, and we're ready to drill on that side. So one thing you might notice on your truck, each side might differ. Every truck's going to be a little different from Ford as well, depending on year, trim, whatever. So this one, I'm actually having to go on the outside edge of the airbag to get at it, whereas on the driver's side I had to go in past the airbag and on the inside to get that nut. So you just got to be a little bit flexible, be patient with it, make sure you get a good path to that bolt in the roof, that way you don't damage anything, and yeah, just be patient. So one thing you don't need to do necessarily, but I like to do every time I pull one of these weather strippings off, get a little detail spray or wet rag and just kind of go up and down through the through that channel, clean it up a little bit. Mainly we're just going to want a nice clean surface to set our mounts down on. Anything I can do to help make it an easier surface to drill into, get a clean hole, I like to do. So I'll just kind of wipe this down, and then I have some little trim tools. I like to also try to get this foam up. It's just a double-sided tape from the bottom of the weather stripping. You don't really need to get all of it up. I just like to get some of the majority of it. Again, we don't even know if a mount's going to land here yet, but just in case it does, it'll ensure a nice solid fit on the roof and a good seal for make sure you have a watertight rack. So now that we got all of that residue up, we're gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll get to assembling the rack. All right, so now that the weather stripping's out, the roof's cleaned, the gutters are all ready for drilling and install, we're gonna come back to our hardware and open up our little pack of rubber plugs. So you're gonna notice in this kit, you're gonna have two different shaped plugs. One's gonna have more of an oval bottom, and one's just gonna be kind of a circle. The smaller circles are gonna be going in the front holes, and the more oval, larger plugs are gonna be going in the rear. So we're gonna take our plugs, grab our little tube of silicone, and head up to the roof. And when installing these, I like to do a little bit of silicone around the hole, kind of to where it comes to meet in the middle. Don't need to go too crazy, but you wanna make sure you have good coverage. Since we're up at the front, we're gonna take our small circle, and we're gonna push that in there. It should be a nice tight fit. Squeeze it down. And then we're gonna go to the rear, our oval shaped plug. Same deal with the silicone, kind of trace the outside of the hole. Making sure you get that good coverage. And then sliding the plug in. And now we'll do the same thing on the other side. So now we actually get to the assembly of the rack. We're gonna be assembling the rack off the truck on this table to the side here. But we're gonna go over a couple components before we get into that. There's a few things you wanna check right off the bat. You're gonna wanna check your rivet mounts, and you're gonna wanna make sure that you have two flat and two contoured. And what I mean by this is the bottom face of the rivet mount will have a slight contour of it. That will be for the front, and then the rears will use a rivet mount that is completely flat on the bottom. You can check this by holding them up to each other. You'll see a little gap on the contoured, and you can just double check that you have two of each before moving on. We're also gonna check that you have a right and left front mount and right and left rear mount. You can tell this by, there's gonna be a notch on the bottom corner of the mounting surface, and they're gonna be opposing one another. That's gonna be, the notch is always gonna face the front side of the vehicle, so that's gonna be your indicator of which side each mount goes on. We're gonna go ahead and install our mounting feet onto our rivet feet. So like I mentioned before, we're gonna set our fronts aside, find our two contoured, and those are gonna go on the front, and then our two flat will go be paired with the rear. To mount these to the rivet feet, you're gonna grab your M8 bolts and your M8 washers. We're not gonna use any Loctite or anything yet. We're just gonna keep everything just finger tight for now, because everything that we install now will be coming apart later. So we'll take our front mount, make sure you have your contoured rivet foot, and grab an M8 bolt with an M8 washer, and just get these all started. I'm just gonna go finger tight again, because these will come off before we start drilling. The threads might be a little gummed up due to powder coat getting down in there, but get a wrench on it, should push right through. So I'll get all of these started, and then we'll move on to the crossbars. A lot of these threads are a little gunked up, it looks like, so we're just gonna grab a 13mm socket, and we're gonna tighten it down with the wrench, but again, we're not gonna go crazy. We're just gonna get them snug. This is gonna just help with proper fitment when we go to put the rack up on the roof, to ensure that we're drilling in the right spot, and that it's gonna sit proper height off the roof and everything like that. So we'll just go again, nice and loose. This whole time I am double checking and triple checking that I have the contoured on the front and the flat on the back. You'll hear me say that a bunch of times, because it is very important for proper fitment. A lot of these threads are a little gunked up, it looks like, so we're just gonna grab a 13mm socket, and we're gonna tighten it down with the wrench, but again, we're not gonna go crazy. We're just gonna get them snug. This is gonna just help with proper fitment when we go to put the rack up on the roof, to ensure that we're drilling in the right spot, and that it's gonna sit proper height off the roof and everything like that. So we'll just go again, nice and loose. This whole time I am double checking and triple checking that I have the contoured on the front and the flat on the back. You'll hear me say that a bunch of times, because it is very important for proper fitment. Now that all of our mounting feet are secured, we're gonna just set those off to the side on our table. We're gonna be coming back to those very shortly. We're gonna now move to our crossbars. We're gonna grab two of those and also set those on the table. You can just space them about a foot apart or so. And then we are going to grab two socket buttons with the long socket buttons with your 1/4" washers on it, and we're gonna grab one side plate. Our mounting slots are gonna be the front slot here that's shortest, and then your rear slot. Positioning right now isn't super critical. We're just gonna make sure we get those in the correct slots, and we can adjust later. I like to just start with one socket button on each slot. That way it just holds it up, balances it nicely, and we can get the other ones in after these first two. So I got it loosely started here. I'm gonna set it over just so my side plates are hanging onto the other side, and grab 2 more socket buttons, head to the other side, and do the same thing. Again, making sure we line up the mounting slot with the correct positioning on the crossbar. It's a little bit awkward to do upside down, but you can make it work. Just want to be careful not to drop your rack. And once all 4 of these are started, so now we got 4 bolts started on each one. I'm going to grab 4 more socket buttons with their 1/4-inch washers and put the remaining bolts in, the remaining crossbar threaded portions, and just keep them loose. We're going to be adjusting the side plate forward and backwards, so we'll keep it loose for now. We'll tighten down here in the next step. So now that our side plates are still loose, we can move our crossbars around in the slot. We're just going to line up the crossbar with somewhere roughly in the middle of the slot and tighten those socket buttons. This doesn't have to be precise. It's just a good way to get it lined up on the roof. And then we can kind of figure out exactly where it needs to sit. I'm going to do the same on the rear. Find somewhere near the middle. And once it's in the middle, just tighten those down. We're going to want this to be tight because when we go to lift up the rack, we don't want it sliding around or falling apart on us. So once those are tight, pretty much make sure they're in the center, and do the same thing on the other side. This way our rack will be relatively square going up on the roof. Again, this is no means the final adjustment, just something to get us started. So now we're tight. The side plates are not moving anymore. I'm going to set the rack back down like this. We have our mounts already over here. We're going to grab our T-nuts. I'm going to grab 8 of them. And we're going to grab our shorter bolts with their 1/4-inch washers. Make sure you grab them all. And we're going to mount the mounts to the crossbars. So again, this is an important step to make sure your front notch or your notch on the bottom mount is going to be facing forward. So the notch should be pointing towards the tip of the side plate. Once you've made sure that's the way it goes, drop 2 T-nuts in. Take your 1/4-20 bolts with their 1/4-inch washers. Set the mount on the crossbar and just thread these into the T-nuts down below. These are going to stay loose for right now. You should be able to slide this back and forth across the crossbar without no issues. You're going to, again, take your rear, find the notch, make sure it faces forward. Drop 2 more T-nuts in. It does not matter which side the T-nut goes as long as the flat side of the T-nut is facing up towards you when you're doing this step. And again, notch forward. Go ahead, thread them in, and make sure they're loose enough to slide around. Now we're going to put the rack up on the truck. This is a good spot to have a friend step in to help you. One person's going to grab the rack. The other buddy's going to be up there already. You're just going to want to be careful not to drop it on the roof, obviously. So I'm going to pass it to him. He's going to set his mounts in the gutter, make sure it's not on the roof. And then I will do the same. And we'll just kind of set it there. It does not matter where it is right now. We'll do all of our adjusting next, but as long as it's sitting in the gutter tracks, we can work with that. So now that the rack is up on the truck, the next step really is finding out where you want it to sit forward and backwards, checking the level compared to the level of the tent. Ours is sitting pretty flat compared to the tent. We're both sitting even. So now it kind of just goes to walking around the truck, making sure it's where you want it to be. At the end of the day, it's not going to be your final placement. If you want to adjust it after it's drilled into the roof, you still have the adjustment in the tracks. So really this is just to get close. The closer you can get initially, obviously the better it will be after, and the easier it will be to adjust to find that perfect fitment. But what we're really looking for here is the spline of the rack. You want that to match the curve of the vehicle. So now we're just going to kind of slide forward, backwards to find, you know, where that looks best. And then we're also going to kind of work around the truck, come to the front, check side to side, make sure the rack's as centered as it can be. I like to use the corner of the windshield as kind of a reference point. You can usually line it up pretty close with the tip of the side plate, and then just kind of look back and forth and compare and find a happy medium. There's not really a great measurement way to do a drill rack, because usually when you drill into the tracks, one of your mounting feet might be a little closer in than the other one, so measuring doesn't always work with a tape measure. A lot of it comes down to eyeballing it and just finding a fitment that you're happy with. So we'll go ahead, kind of do our thing here, get it all squared up, and then we'll be ready to mark some holes and drill. One thing to notice on these Ford trucks, for whatever reason, they like to put this weird hard foam on one of the edges or right down the middle. It differs from truck to truck. It's the same way on the F-150s. You're going to want to find a spot where your mounting feet are sitting. They don't need to be directly on that. They don't need to be directly centered. You're just going to want to find a spot where they get the most surface contact on the bottom of the foot to the roof. That'll make drilling easier, and it'll make riveting them down way easier if you're not balancing on the middle of that weird seam. So now I'm satisfied with where the rack is sitting on the truck. I'm going to grab a tool to mark where I'll be drilling my holes. I'm grabbing just a little trim tool. You can use a center punch or any other kind of tool, marker, pen, Sharpie, whatever you like to use to find that center of that hole on the rivet mount. But I'm going to use this because this roof is abnormally slippery, so the rack's kind of sliding around on us. So I want to be able to stay away from it as much as I can because I really like the placement. What I'm going to do is find the center of the hole where the rivet's going to be going and double check, and then just make a small mark. Nothing has to be permanent yet. We're going to be taking the rack off to drill. So this is simply marking where all 8 of those holes are. That way there's no question that it will go back on properly when it's time. So now that all of our holes are marked, I double checked to make sure everything was still centered. I'm going to be removing the rack, center punching the holes and drilling. So first things first though, we're going to get this thing out of the way. I'm going to actually just set it up on his go fast. That way we don't have to keep lifting this thing up. And now I'll find my holes, make sure they're routed to where I wanted them, and get the center punch out. Now that the rack's out of the way, I found my marks. I have my center punch, and I'm just going to punch these a couple times. What this will do is leave a nice starting place for when I start drilling. It'll help make sure the drill bit isn't walking on me, and we don't want that to happen, because when your drill bit starts walking, we're going to lose our center of our hole, and then it gets a little bit weird after that. So you're going to want to make sure you get a couple really nice center punches in there to ensure no slippage. I'm going to take another extra little step and take a Sharpie and mark these holes. On a silver roof, these are pretty small holes, and there's some scratches and other stuff down here anyway, so I just want to make absolute sure that I'm going to be drilling in the right spot. So I'm going to take a Sharpie, mark my holes that I center punched. That way there's no confusion. Do this on the other side as well. And now we're going to take off the rivet mounts that we had left just finger tight earlier in the install. We're going to just do one of the flats and one of the contours. And this is just another safety check to make sure that we have our holes in the right spot before drilling. So I'm finding my 2 marked holes. I'm putting my rivet mount down and seeing if that still lines up centered. This one does. I'll check the other side, and then I'll do the same thing with the contoured mount up front. Okay, I got my contoured for the front, and again, double checking. Everything looks good. So now I'm feeling pretty confident on drilling. So now comes the fun part. Now we get to drill through our roof. We're going to be using a 3/16 bit right off the bat. We have a nice bit that we trust to not walk. If you don't have good bits or you don't really feel comfortable going right to 3/16, you can feel free to step up, start small and get bigger. One thing that I highly recommend, can't recommend enough, is getting a good drill stop. This is going to ensure that when you finally get through the roof, it doesn't go plunging all the way down into your airbag. I like to set it up 1/2 inch up the bit, 1/4 inch up the bit. You can adjust it as you go, but very, very important for a drill rack like this, especially because all under here is where your airbags live. So if you want to keep your airbags intact, get a drill stop. So yeah, pretty much straightforward. We're just going to go ahead, start drilling out our holes. I'm going to double check as I go. I have my rivet mount still off. We'll just double check each time we drill and see how it goes. All 8 of our holes are now drilled. After we drilled the holes, they just got a vacuum up here, cleaned out the debris. We don't want that getting mixed in with the silicone or under the mounts. So now we took the rest of our rivet feet off. We're gonna get our silicone one more time, and we're gonna put, same deal, put a little bit of silicone around each hole. And this is gonna be the step that you wanna finalize. This is gonna be a final time to check that your contoured foot is going in the front. Silicone on the holes. I'm gonna pre-install the rivets. That'll kind of help line everything up, and simply drop those down, pushing them all the way down. And let me grab my rivet gun. Now that that's on there, take our rivet gun, slide down over and rivet it to the roof. Now the front's riveted in. We're going to do the same thing to the rear. Again, last time to check. Make sure your flat's going in the rear. Silicone a little bit over the holes, making sure you get good coverage. Grab your 2 rivets. And then just drop on in. It's important to make sure your rivets are seated all the way down before riveting them in. Sometimes you have to give them a little bit of a tap to make sure they go all the way down. And then we'll rivet it in. Okay, you'll notice after your mounts are riveted in, you might see a little bit of separation in the rivet and the pin in the middle. So we just like to say to add a small dab of silicone just for that extra assurance that you're not going to be having water get into your roof whatsoever. Don't need to do much, just a small dab over the top should seal you completely. Our rivet mounts are riveted to the roof. All the holes are siliconed closed. So now we're gonna flip our rack back onto the mounts. Remember, all your mounting feet are still attached to the crossbars. And I'm gonna let Scott over here get his M8 bolts started into the rivet mounts first. I'll just kind of keep my side supported in the air. Again, this is not a step that we have to worry about centering too much. We just basically want to get everything bolted to the roof and secured, and then we can start worrying about centering the rack up and making it look nice. Both of us are just getting them threaded into the rivet mount below, and we can tighten it later, but just to keep the rack in place and secure, we're just going to get them started. Now that mine are started, the rack can no longer go anywhere, and we can start tightening them up. So now the rack is bolted. Every component is still loose. The only 2 things that are tight are our side plates. So now we're going to kind of just work around the truck again, work to get it squared up, forward, backwards, where we're happy with it, and then we'll go ahead, tighten everything down, and finish the rack off. So after some adjustment side to side, we didn't actually end up adjusting forward and back at all. We were happy with where it was sitting. So we're going to tighten down the bolts going up into the crossbars and the bolts going down into the feet. After that, we're just going to move to the fairing and wrap this thing up. Final step, we're going to be doing the putting the fairing on the crossbar. To do this, I like to draw 3 imaginary lines from the holes up to the crossbar. Drop our T-nuts in. And this placement isn't super critical right now. Just try to get them in the general vicinity of the mounting holes. Once you got your T-nuts in, take your fairing, set it up on the crossbar. I like to get the middle bolt started first. And we're just going to get these started. No tightening down until we're finished. And now that these are started, we can slide the fairing side to side, finding the T-nuts below, and just getting the rest of the bolts started. And then, once we got all our bolts in, I like to hold each side of the fairing, budge it up to the ends, make it flush. Once both sides are flush, the fairing's flush with the crossbar below, tighten down the socket button bolts, and install up on the rack. Another good step to have a friend help you here. Fairings can be a little heavy and awkward, so I've got Scott up on top of the truck, ready for it. Grab your remaining 1-inch socket buttons and head on up. This is easier to do one at a time. You both try to do it at the same time, you end up fighting each other and it gets a little awkward. But I'll just get mine started and he can do the same. The way we're going to want to set this up is we line the bottom edge to the edge trim up with the bottom of the fairing, or the side plate. And this should leave us with about 1/8 to 1/4 inch gap off the roof. It should not be sitting on the roof, and it shouldn't be sitting much higher than that. If you're on the roof, your rack's probably in the wrong spot. But once you are happy with the gap there, you can go ahead and tighten it down. And generally speaking, if you have wind noise after your install is complete, the fairing is the best place to start. Moving it up and down even 1/8 of an inch can make a big difference in noise. Okay, so the rack install is complete. All you have left to do now is put back together the interior. Again, if you have any questions about doing this, just click the link in the bio. We have the video of how to remove everything. Going back to putting it back together, kind of just do the reverse steps of that. If you have any issues with that, feel free to reach out. Other than that, after a few hundred miles or a couple days of driving, it's a really good idea to go back through, get your hands on all the hardware, make sure nothing's vibrated loose. After that first little break-in period, if nothing's come loose, you should be good to go. Other than that, the rack looks great. We do understand that this is a difficult, long, kind of tedious install, so please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions, concerns, help on finding an installer, anything like that. We're happy to help. Other than that, successful install. Rack looks great. Thanks for watching.